You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Hello, welcome to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Its purpose is to dissect and discuss horror films, both old and new. We are taking the chance now to look at a classic in the horror film franchise known as Child's Play. It did celebrate its 30th year, its 30th anniversary last year, when it after having originally come out in 1988. But before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts and the guts of the piece, I should introduce myself. My name is Saul Muerte. I am the lead surgeon of the Surgeons of Horror podcast. I'm joined by the delightful Greer. Thanks for coming on board, Greer.
Thanks for having me, Saul.
It's been a fair while since we've had you in the mix. Rumour has it that you had to attend to some child rearing kind of thing. I don't know.
I think the last time we did this was about 3 or 4 days before I had a daughter.
I want to say that's true. And I can't even remember what it was, whether it was it or one of those ones. But
No, it was... No, it wasn't Poltergeist. I didn't do that one. It was one of the Night of the Living Dead.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I think it was Dawn of the Dead.
It was Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
So look, it's always great to have you back because I know that you have a strong love for horror films. And
all types of horror films. Sorry, we need to qualify this.
Yes.
Well, yes, I'm not a massive fan of the new stuff.
Okay. So. You're not keen on the Blumhouse kind of new generation kind of style horror films that are out at the moment?
No, look, I've seen a couple that are not too bad,
yeah.
But I feel like we're just rehashing and redishing the same things over and over again.
Yeah.
So I am probably a really good person to talk to about stuff like Child's Play.
Yes.
Exactly. 1988, like it's kind of my era. No, it's not my era. I was really young then.
Yeah.
But I do think that I do think that there's something to be said for the old school.
Yeah, well, particularly the 1980s. And we've mentioned this before. And apologies to new gen listeners out there who might be thinking, what are these old fogies talking about? But the 1980s was the golden era of horror. Okay, and a lot of that was down to the video nasties, the video hired gems, where most people our age first discovered these horror films and were like, "This is crazy ass shit." And I think a lot of that was down to the freedom that these directors had in making these films as well, because everything's a lot more controlled these days. Whereas a lot of the films that we love in the horror genre in particular was that we have these up and coming directors that had this freedom to kind of create what they wanted to create on film. And that's why we got the likes of like Evil Dead coming up and Wes Craven in the mix and stuff, and John Carpenter's Halloween, you name it, all these films that were coming out around that time frame. And they hold a specific nostalgic value to us. And that's why I think you're quite right, Greer. You're probably the perfect person to talk to when it comes to Child's Play, because as we said, 1988, this came out. What was your earliest memory of this film? Do you remember the first time you watched it at all?
I actually don't remember the first time I watched it. But then it wouldn't have been 88. I was only about 10.
Yeah. So
it would have been the early 90s. I would have seen it. It would have been like a VHS.
Yeah.
Yes, because it would have been well before the DVD days.
Yeah.
So VHS, kind of hire at the video shop, probably a Saturday night with my friends from school, slumber party, lots of horror films.
Yeah.
Like, I don't specifically remember watching this one, then, but I know I've seen it. So I know I had seen it, and I know I'd seen it quite some time ago. So I just remember feeling like a bit kind of terrified. I think, not quite young enough to be afraid of dolls,
no.
But not quite so old to not think that dolls couldn't be terrifying, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think it was that kind of right age bracket between the two, But that's kind of, I don't know. I think it was the whole. I think it's the whole kidness of it that is what is actually quite terrifying.
Yes, I agree. It's it's really it's interesting watching it back. 'Cause I watched it, I think, like you, watched it back semi recently, and I'm reminded of how actually cheap the film is. You know, it's not it doesn't have these kind of full blown kind of CGI effects that we've become accustomed to now. The plot line is a very basic plot line when you actually pare it down and look at it. It's not there's nothing really too complex about it, which is probably why it shines so much, you know, and stands out. Which I guess we'll get to in a bit more, or I'll explain what I mean by that in a bit. But I remember my reaction to it, and I think I'm very similar to you. I can't remember the very first time I watched it, but I do seem to remember more than anything the opening scene with the voodoo kind of spell kind of thing that Brad Dourif does, and being a bit freaked out by that, and thinking, and not really, I don't think, whenever I watched it, I don't think I was really aware of what this whole concept of soul transfer was. And that just freaked me out, that you could just move into something completely non-living, and I think that freaked me out more than anything else. And the rest of it I felt like was a bit of a fun ride for me, because of the doll aspect. I don't think I was ever frightened of Chucky, but I kind of liked his mannerisms and how kind of just outrageous he was, you know, and how freaky he was. And I was just like, yeah, I kind of dig, like, I'm kind of rooting for the killer in this one, you know, like, because let's face it, Andy was a bit annoying.
Andy was annoying.
So,
that's very...
so look, it's very cool. I kind of, that was my reaction to it. There was a bit kind of freaky at the beginning, and then kind of enjoyed the rest of it. I think that, like, as a kid, that is definitely quite terrifying. But I think as an adult, like, having just rewatched it as well, you can you've kind of got to suspend belief here, because you know, like, with the whole voodoo thing, like, it's not something that I believe in. It's not a concept that I'm particularly familiar with. And that was not Chucky. So I think you have to suspend belief a little bit to kind of think, like, how could this transference happen? That is as an adult, but I can definitely see why that would be quite terrifying. When you look at it though, like, Chucky on his own, I could say Chucky on his own is actually, like, quite a harmless looking doll, but I think having been for so many years, like, it's been bred into you that Chucky is evil. There's been movie after movie telling you that Chucky's evil, Chucky's bride is evil, everyone, anything to do with Chucky is evil. I actually can't even look at Chucky and think Chucky is like a nice, harmless, innocent doll. To me, Chucky is always just crazy. Charles Lee Ray. Psycho. Yeah.
Killer.
Yeah, that's right. No, he is. He's a psychotic killer. That's exactly right. Okay, so I guess maybe this is the point then to just kind of quickly whiz through the plot that's provided to us before we then kind of break that down and look at the impact that this movie had, why it resonates so much today as well, and why there's so many sequels as well. So obviously there is a pull factor there. But yeah, before we get to that, let's have a quick natter around what actually occurs in the film. So we kind of have like a fugitive scene, don't we? We've got this psycho killer in human form, played by Brad Dourif, and his name is Charles Lee Ray. And now his name is actually taken from 3 known serial killers in real life. So we've got Charles Manson, Harvey Lee Oswald, and James L. Ray are the 3. So it's a combination. So, you know, they basically have gone with
subliminal messaging in there.
Yeah. Like that. Let's just think of 3 of the most fucked up humans known to man, and we'll combine them into this entity of this psychotic killer, serial killer. Interestingly, too, like as a side note that I'll just throw out there, and I don't intend for anyone to pick that up unless they find that interesting. But there is a commonality with serial killers having three names to them. You know, so like we've got Lee Harvey Oswald, and there's a bunch of others which I can't remember.
Serial killer. He just shot JFK.
He's not really a serial killer. Okay, people that are fucked up, that do fucked up things.
Let's change it to that.
Yeah. Okay. So we have this guy, and he's on the run. We have a few kind of cops kind of chasing after him. He's being shot, and he's trying to make it to his getaway car. The getaway car driver freaks out, and he drives off with the police car chasing after it. We don't really see that guy again until a bit later on. The focus is more on Charles Lee Ray, and he's been in pursuit by a detective, or is it two detectives? I think anyway, it's definitely one detective in this instance. Detective Mike Norris, played by Chris Sarandon, who is basically Prince Humperdinck from Princess Bride, right? You know that. So it's hard to watch him with a straight face anyway. Particularly, and again, I'm going to put a pin in this again, but particularly the car scene later on in the movie, which we'll come to. Excuse me. Well, my turn now. Coffee. Okay, so we have Charles Lee Ray. He breaks into the. He's trying to find a getaway. He breaks into this toy shop to kind of just get away. Instantly, you get thinking, yeah, you're screwed. You're not going to get out of that situation. He's bleeding quite badly, and the detective goes in pursuit after him, and sorry. So he's in this. He's been fatally shot in this toy shop. He realizes that he's dying. He then does this whole transferring of his soul thing by casting what's said here is a Haitian voodoo spell. And I can't remember the correct words, but he basically lifts his hand up to the gods. Oh, this big storm starts coming, and as he dies on the shop floor, he has to look for the nearest thing he can transfer his soul to, and it just so happens to be that he stumbles into a big pile of boxes, all of which are containing these good guys doll, and that's where he picks one, transfers his soul into it, just as I think there's a huge explosion that's caused, isn't there, from the bolt of lightning that strikes the shop?
The shop, and everything explodes, and that's it.
Yeah, it is important to say that the detective Chris Sarandon does survive the explosion.
Of course, because we need.
Yeah, we need somebody that can carry that story on. To tell it. So then we then cut to I don't know. Oh, it's the following day apparently, and we have a single mum, played by whose name's Karen, played by Catherine Hicks, who I never watched Seventh Heaven, right? I'll just put that out there. But her face looks so familiar. I was like, how do I know her? And it must have been from like running commercials or something from that, because I don't know her from anywhere else. And I swear to you, I never watched Seventh Heaven.
I think she was in a couple of the Lethal Weapon films as well.
That rings a bell, actually. Now you just said that, and I'm gonna Google that. Yeah, I'm gonna Google that in the background while we continue to talk. But she basically, we see her with her son, this guy called Andy Barclay, who's played by Alex Vincent, who actually goes on to reprise the role of Andy numerous times in the sequels, I should say. And it's Andy's birthday. He's 6 years old, and he's looking to. He really is besotted with the Chucky doll and the Good Guys doll, I should say. And he's got there's the cartoon playing in the background. He's got Chucky Cheetos or whatever it is that he's eating. And he's basically got everything there, and the only thing he doesn't have is a Chucky doll, and he's always been wanting this. Since like forever. Oh right, so she was in Star Trek 4: The Voyage Home.
not Lethal Weapon at all. I don't know what else. There's obviously some other woman, blonde-haired woman who looks like her.
Yeah, you once you've seen one blonde-haired female actress, you know.
Woman in
yeah, that's it.
Right?
That's it. Yeah, surely.
Yeah.
I'm just having a quick squeeze now as well to see if there's anything else. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's probably it. So we have her. She's struggling. We kind of meet her best friend as well, Maggie, who is such a Bronx chick that but she's also
she was in Greece.
Greece, yeah, that's right. Dana, and I've forgotten her freaking surname. Madoff, yeah. She's Greece. She's Greece. Yeah, that's right.
She's the plucky, sassy best friend.
She is the sassy best friend.
You know she's going to be the first one to die.
You know she's not in for a good thing, particularly because she's got a heart of gold. She's got a tough exterior. And let's face it, Chucky ain't going to stand for that once he's around. But before this kind of leads up, her ultimate demise, before that occurs, we do get the whole kind of plight of the shop. She turns up, says that there's some kind of peddler at the back of the store where Mum works at that happens to have one of these dolls. Just coincidentally happens to be the possessed doll.
There's no such thing as coincidence.
There's no such thing as coincidence. So, but she gets her hands on it, buys it, gets it for Andy for his birthday. And there's some weird goings on though at the beginning, isn't it? There's some weird stuff going on with, and you might have to kind of remind me of this because the synopsis I've got in front of me misses stuff out. But I thought there was indications of his possession before we have the babysitting scene. Anyway, but there's points where he's like Andy's playing with Chucky as well, and it's and I'm sure he blames Chucky for something. I can't remember what it is now.
Yeah, so Andy goes. His mum takes him, picks him up. She has to work late. It's his birthday. She picks him up. She gives him the toy.
Yes.
And then the babysitter, the best friend, the sassy best friend / babysitter comes to look after him.
Yep.
And they, and then a couple of things happen, and he starts blaming Chucky.
That's right. And he said that Chucky did it. And it's like the TV goes on and things like that.
And Chucky says some things, and of course, no adult believes him. So the mum's plucky best friend does not believe him.
No.
And so she tells him off and kind of rushes him to bed and, drags Chucky along by his arm.
Yes.
And this does not bode well, really.
No, it doesn't. So she doesn't believe him. There's a point though where she starts to think something's a bit amiss. And she does, the phone goes off, doesn't it? And it's the mum checking in on it, on Maggie is her name. And she kind of says, acts a bit spooked out and just no, it must be nothing. And anyway, but she does, then, after tucking Andy into bed, she is then confronted by Chucky. So she thinks she hears a noise by the window, doesn't she, at first? And there's a pot plant or something.
Yeah.
And she starts making her way over to it, and then she turns around, and we don't ever see Chucky himself come out. We just see a hammer come at her and hit her in the face, and she spirals backwards and then crashes out of this window, which happens to be the top floor of this apartment, and then falls to her death. And probably one of the most amazing deaths ever captured in horror film history. Lands on a car.
Pretty incredible. So, but it's your classic horror movie trope, right?
Yeah.
It's the fake. It's the fake out. It's the she's spooked out. She's wandering around the apartment scared of everything.
Yeah.
Phone rings, frightens her, hangs up the phone. I'm overreacting. Calms down, turns around, walks away. Boom, just like that, dead.
Yeah.
And 80s classic.
80s classic.
It's a very classic 80s. Yes.
It is, and actually, so the the writer Don Mancini, who's behind the stories, has been behind most of the sequels, if not all of them. This is actually directed by Tom Holland, and I'll get to some of his credentials.
Tom Holland, who stars in Spider-Man.
Yes.
Before he was born.
Yeah, he looks very different kind of person entirely. But he was the same director that his directorial debut actually came out 3 years before that, which was the vampire horror film Fright Night. So he was kind of known for the horror movie genre, and he was also known for the comedy side of things too. With that, so and he did a couple of other films which were in the horror movie circuit, but those two films were probably his more claim to fame. But my point what I was going to raise is that they actually do he does a pretty good job of raising that suspense beforehand, and it does tick all the right kind of tropes in order to kind of stir up the emotions a bit. My only thing is, though, the death seemed a bit weak. I don't mean the fact that she falls out the window. I just mean the way it happens, because she does get hit in the face, and then she spirals backwards, which seems like an eternity before she falls out the window. And it reminded me a little bit of... Do you remember Naked Gun, where Leslie Nielsen gets hit in the face with a pillow? And he just does this over-dramatic kind of spiralling backwards, and it's just a pillow. And I'm watching that going, like, maybe that reference more, in connection with me recently seeing it. I can't remember my reaction when I first saw it, but when I watched it recently, I just was like, that was just ridiculous. I mean, sure, being hit in the face with a hammer hurts, but you're not going to fall backwards an entire length of a bedroom to then go falling out of this window. And I just like, yeah, that was a bit ridiculous. Yeah, a little bit. But there's nothing that isn't really over the top when it comes to Chucky. Like, the kills become quite synonymous, especially if you look at the franchise. It goes to extremes in the way that he goes to about killing people, and that's part of what people have come to enjoy about the Chucky movies. So we have our first death. We have the girl the mum coming back to kind of realise that her best friend's been killed, and we have Andy in kind of police custody, being a bit quizzed about it because the only evidence they have are the size of these sneakers that are a similar size, footprint,
on the kitchen bench,
the kitchen bench, and they're the same size as Andy. They're kids' shoe size. They just can't find the matching shoes. So the detective, who happens again to be our friend Chris Sarandon.
There is only one detective in Chicago.
Yeah, and his partner, who just seems to be a bit this kind of wasted kind of guy. So anyway, so he's a bit kind of like suspects that it could be Andy that's behind it, but obviously the motive seems a bit sus. Why? What's behind this? And he hasn't got the proof of what it is. But he does find the hammer, and thinks that that's the murder weapon. So he's definitely on the money. He's a bit smart. He just can't quite work out how it's coming together because in that sense,
it doesn't make any sense. It's a doll.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you've got a kid who's saying he's saying nothing really.
No, that's right. So the mum realises the tree that he's barking up, and basically tells him to kind of fuck off out of the house. But then as you would, like, what are you talking about? But then, like, things get a bit more kind of fall into a bad place for Randy at this point because he decides to skip school with Chucky.
Well, doesn't he first tells his mum though that Chucky said that Maggie was a bitch and she deserved to die.
That's right. Sorry. And this is like, and so Mum's getting a bit worried because Andy's showing signs of his behaviour that weren't there before. So she's even like, who is this kid? That's not my son, and he would never swear and blah blah blah. Where's this all coming from? So then Chucky orders Andy to skip school the next day to go downtown, basically to Eddie Caputo's house. So Eddie Caputo is the getaway driver who fucked off. And they kind of get to outside his house. Chucky then kind of runs off in without Andy realising into Eddie's house, and he basically goes into the kitchen and turns on the gas oven. Eddie comes home, he hears the noises in the kitchen, comes through the front into the door of the kitchen, and he basically shoots towards the oven, which causes this huge explosion, killing himself. And there's a huge explosion. Once again, Andy's deemed the suspect because he's there at the scene of the crime, and they decide to place him in a psychiatric hospital. So there, and the mum has no real kind of control over this. Sorry, go on.
Possibly, it is also possibly secretly relieved because, you know, she, even though she doesn't want to think it of her son, she's also probably kind of suspicious, like right. New behaviour. But the thing I was thinking though is that this movie is only 80 minutes long.
Yeah.
I feel like if it was made now, it would 2 hours long, and you would explore like the psychology behind why Andy was acting like this, the dead dad, you know, a divorce, or all of these sorts of things. Whereas back then it was kind of just implied.
Yes, that's right.
You know, it was just like, this kid's gone a bit nuts. He's a bit out of control.
Yeah, we never really know what happened to the dad, do we? So we just know he's absent. So this is all good point, and one of the reasons we're recording this now, we did talk about doing a Child's Play podcast back last year when it was having its 30th anniversary. We both had other commitments at the time, but coincidentally, we are now we've kind of come full circle a little bit, because there is a remake coming out this year, and we're going to time this release so people will be listening to it hopefully kind of around the time that comes out, which isn't too far away. It's like July time. So
is it a remake though? Like, so they're actually remaking the original?
It's a remake of the original. Yeah, well, let's get into that now. It's a remake of the original, but it is not a possessed doll.
Oh.
It's a robotic doll that goes wrong.
So it's AI.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it turns into a murdering doll.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So automatically I'm like,
It sounds like every post-apocalyptic movie that has been released in the last decade.
Yeah. So I'm not that convinced by it, but happy to be persuaded otherwise. So let's go back to the plot line, because we're coming up to the climax, sort of, or at least the reveal, because this is where Karen, the mum, is at home. She's in a bit of despair. She's reading the box which Chucky comes in, and realises that a pack of batteries drops out. And at that point, she then also realises that Chucky had been functioning without batteries this whole time, and that maybe, just maybe, Andy was telling the truth all along. And this is where she goes to pick him up, and we get that famous bit where he turns his head around at her and says, "Hi, I'm Chucky, wanna play?" And then I think he scratches her or something, and she drops him. She bites his arm.
He bites her, yeah.
And then he drops on the floor, rolls under the chair. Karen kind of runs after him as he comes out, but kind of loses track of him, and she bumps into the detective, isn't it, at the station? Yes, Mike. I was just checking Mike was the detective's name. She bumps into him at the station, and he doesn't really, like, she's trying to convince him that everything was true. Everything Andy has said was the truth. The detective just thinks that she's just been a protective mum at this point and trying to cover for him. And then so she gets pissed off, runs off, because she wants to go and find where Chucky is. Mike gets into the car and decides to drive home, at which point Chucky reveals himself in Mike's car. And there's this whole kind of... I just found this so comical, this bit. Because Chucky's trying to attack him in the car. The scene goes on for ages of him driving along with Chucky kind of trying to shoot him.
Strangle him first.
Like strangle him. Isn't there a bit where the knife comes through the bottom of the chair? And Mike's trying to shoot him, and I'm just the whole time I'm just going, stop the fucking car. Just stop the car and get out, and then deal. You're shocked because you've got a doll that's come to life, but it just went on for too long, that scene, for it to be believable. You're just like, you'd stop. By that point, you go, no, fuck this. Get out the car, process what's going on, and go, right, now, what the hell am I doing with? Shoot it, But no, he ends up crashing the car, doesn't he?
But even then, it still kind of goes on, and then you kind of got Chucky. So he's upside down, on his back in the car, with the car's roof, and Chucky's there with a knife. But then, it's all a bit. It is a bit of a weird sequence.
I just found, I don't know whether you're meant to go into the suspension of disbelief there, but I just felt like that whole scene was just a bit too unbelievable, too much into that realm. It just seemed to drag. I just felt like maybe it's because we're so used to stuff today being a bit kind of quicker, and the action being a bit more choreographed, I guess. But it just felt like it was a bit too dragged out, that scene. And I can't remember. I think, that's right. So he just starts shooting at him, doesn't he? And so Chucky manages to get away, essentially. But we have now got to convince Mike, as in that there is a possessed doll out there. We then get Chucky visiting this guy who... This is where we get a bit of backstory, because this guy he goes to visit happens to be his old voodoo instructor. So this is where...
Because everyone wants a voodoo instructor.
Everyone's if I ever get into a position where I want to transfer my soul, I want to know I can do it correctly. Where am I going to go to? Flick through yellow.
I don't know how I got to 40 years of age without knowing how to transfer my soul into a doll.
Just Google it, voodoo instructor for transfer the soul, and you'll come across some expert, I'm sure. But so apparently Charles Lee Ray learned all this stuff from this voodoo instructor, but he's obviously gone there because he's trapped in this doll, and he's like, he wants to be a human. So he's gone to his former instructor to go, how does this happen? And he uses, the guy doesn't want to help him, and so Chucky ends up kind of using torture.
That's what he says to him. You're an abomination.
That's right. You shouldn't be right. And so Chucky happens to have a voodoo doll, and he uses that to inflict pain upon his former tutor in order for the guy to disclose what he needs to do. And he basically says that the only way you can transfer your soul into a human is that it has to be the first human that he told he was alive. That just so happens to be Andy, the boy. And so he's just like, okay, fine. And then he stabs the doll in a place where...
Breaks both the legs first.
Break the legs first, that's right.
Yeah, then stabs the doll.
And then stabs the doll, killing John. Okay, so he then leaves, and then this is where Karen and Mike then... they then somehow turn up at the scene of the voodoo guy's house. I don't know how they got there. Anyway, but he's still alive at this point.
No, that's right. I remember how Mike goes back to the precinct and goes through some files.
Okay.
Before even Chucky went, the car chased the car.
Okay.
And because he starts to think that there is something, that maybe she's not as crazy as her son.
Yeah.
There might be something to it. He wants to know more. So that's when he finds the photo of the voodoo.
Gotcha.
Dude.
Yep. Okay, cool. That makes sense now. It's almost like that's a great leap of faith there, but yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so they turn up, they find the gruesome scene. The voodoo guy is still alive, and he basically says what Chucky's plan is, that in order for him to, resurrect, he has to do it with Andy. So they realise they've got to go rescue Andy. He also tells them that the only way to stop Chucky is to basically shoot at his heart, or kill him in the heart, basically. So this is a very kind of vampire mythology coming into play here, where stake him through the heart, stop the heart from beating, and you stop the beast from living. So that's what we've been told. So they know how to kill him now. We then have now we get to the climax of the movie where we're at the mental hospital, the psychiatric hospital. Andy happens to look outside the window of his room, and he sees Chucky going up the fire escape. So he realizes that Chucky's coming there to kill him. Tries to persuade the doctor that what's happening. He doesn't believe him. And there's I can't remember again, you might have to fill in the blank here, but somehow he gets out of the room. And they end up in a surgery room.
So Chucky gets some keys and lets himself into Andy's room, but Andy's done the classic pillow under the blanket treat.
Right. That's right.
So when Chucky's on the bed trying to attack Andy or slash the pillow, Andy manages to get out of the room and lock the door.
Yep.
Yeah, except the doctor thinks Andy's trying to escape, and so the doctor's chasing Andy around, and that's how they all end up in the surgical kind of.
That's right. Okay, thank you.
Although I think it's not really surgical; it's like a treatment room. It looks like it's which brings us to
electroshock therapy, isn't it? That's right. Because that's important. Because the doctor is trying to subdue Andy with a syringe, and at this and Andy's trying to warn the doctor. The doctor doesn't believe him. Chucky comes in and basically overpowers the doctor, and then gets him into the electroshock machine, and basically fries the doctor's brain, killing him. And probably one of the better kill scenes in this film, actually. So then Andy then has to try and kind of get away. And he does so by actually running home. So he actually knows how to get home from the
mental institution.
Yeah. But there you go. Gets home. Chucky's in.
He's a resourceful 6-year-old.
Yes, he is. He really is. Chucky follows him, but into the house, manages to knock Andy unconscious, and then that's when he starts to prepare his ritual. The mum and the detective arrive in time to try and stop the process. At which point we have the climax kind of fight scene. Chucky basically is he hits Mike, the detective, with a baseball bat, and then
after he stabs him, or does they cut his leg?
They cut his legs or something. Yeah, there's a lot of
there's a lot of stuff.
A lot of stuff coming into play here. There's the usual kind of he's not dead, he's dead, he's not dead kind of scenario coming into effect. He basically ends up getting thrown into the fireplace and starts burning, and they kind of think that he's dead. And they go back to the detective who had been stabbed. So they go to check. So when I say they, that's the mum, I think, goes in, doesn't she?
Yeah, mum and Andy, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's right. I'm forgetting. They actually throw him into the fireplace first, pin him in, and Andy's the one that drops the lit match just before Chucky basically says, we're friends forever, or whatever that line is. And burns Chucky alive. So then they go and check to see if the detective's okay. At which point, Andy realizes that the ashes of where the doll has now disappeared. And then we get this kind of mutilated, kind of burnt corpse dragging himself along the ground to try and basically kind of still go after Andy. Karen just starts shooting at it, essentially. Blowing him to bits a little bit, and he's presumed to be again when he's to be dead again when he stops moving. At which point, the detective's partner, comes on the scene at the apartment. He doesn't really believe any of them. Chucky's body comes out and starts strangling him, or the remains of what Chucky's body is. And isn't the head kind of lying there going, kill him, kill him?
Yeah. The decapitated body is literally trying to strangle the detective's partner. Yeah. And and the head's going, kill him, kill him.
Yeah, it's hilarious. I love it. It's so funny. And then we finally get Chucky finally gets shot in the heart. and he's actually finally dead.
Nice shot, Aaron. Nice shot.
Nice shot. Yeah. Mike gets taken outside by Karen and Jack, and Andy stays and stares at Chucky's corpse before shutting the lights off and closing the door in what is essentially a freeze frame, and we get the closed credits.
Really closed the door though. Leaves the door open.
Just a bit ajar, just enough.
Just
enough to give you a hint of sequel, and of course there would be sequels.
And as my lovely husband just pointed out from the sidelines,
yes.
There does appear to be Chucky giving the finger to them all from his dead, burnt, charred, plastic doll corpse.
Yeah.
It does appear like he's giving them all the finger. So
I think, and obviously that was intended. I don't know whether at the time they knew that they had such a big hit on their hands or not. But obviously, there would be, like we've discussed, there would be sequels that have been going on. Like we've had 7 installments in total, including the original, right? So this remake is going to be the eighth one.
Yeah.
So the first couple were just called like Child's Play 2 and Child's Play 3, and then we get Bride of Chucky. So this is where the franchise took an interesting turn with playing on the whole kind of Frankenstein theme, but also the humour ratcheted up a notch, and we get the introduction of Jennifer Tilly coming into play, and she's become incredibly synonymous with the franchise herself. Then we get Seed of Chucky, Curse of Chucky, and the last one that came out was Cult of Chucky, which came out 2 years ago. And there's there's been a lot of concept and discussions around the future of it, and we know that there's a remake coming out, but Don Mancini, the guy that is behind the franchise, has always hinted at ideas. At one point he entertained the idea of doing a crossover with the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise because he liked the idea of Freddy and Chucky going on a killing duo spree together in action, which actually sounds quite fun. But the crux of it, is and there's been actually in Bride of Chucky, the Freddy Krueger glove does appear at one point in this a police holding cell where they keep evidence. So in there they actually had Chucky's they had Freddy's glove, Jason's mask, and I think Leatherface's chainsaw in there. So there's hints of potential crossover kind of stuff going on. The interesting thing, though, just keeping on the Don Mancini kind of conversation, is that apparently, back in February a year ago, he did announce that there was going to be a Child's Play TV series in the works, like an 8-part thing, which apparently in the beginning of January this year, Sci-Fi Wire announced that the series will air on Sci-Fi, with Mancini writing it. And Brad Dourif is still playing the voice of Chucky in that. So it's going to be very different. It's going to be separate to the reboot that's happening. And whether it'll be a standalone kind of 8-part series, I don't know at this stage. I guess that'll depend on the amount of interest that is behind it. But at this stage, it's supposed to be happening. So it'll be interesting to kind of keep an eye on that as it unfolds.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's just kind of come back to our reaction to the original, the original Child's Play. It's hard to not talk about this without talking about Brad Dourif in this, because to me, I can't envisage anyone else playing or providing the voice of Chucky. He walks hand in hand with the idea of Chucky. His voice, and every time you hear his voice in other films and things he's been in, you do kind of, Chucky does spring to mind. And you can tell over the years of the films that he's had fun in that role too, and it's had an impact on his family because his daughter also turns up playing in the films as well. I want to say her name's Fiona Dourif off the top of my head, but I'm having a massive mind blank right now. But anyway, my point is that he's obviously, obviously he brings in money too that comes into it because there are still people who come and watch it. But I just think he's a great actor anyway, and I think I as I said, I just find it really, really hard to see. I can't envisage anyone else providing the voice to Chucky because of that. But what is it, do you think, about that is the appeal of Chucky? Because as we've said, there's been 7 installments thus far about Chucky. What identifies him? What makes him so appealing when there has been other attempts at killer doll movies that have never really hit the mark?
Look, I think it's because it was the first.
Yeah.
And I think it played on that, like that generation, so our generation.
Yeah.
That idea that your dolls, your toys are alive when you're asleep. That they come to life and that they have this life outside of it. I mean, if you wanted to be really, really simplistic, like Toy Story's done it. In a nicer way than Child's Play.
And the kid's name is Andy in that too.
True. It is Andy. A much more child-friendly way, but I think that's kind of what it is. I think it's about this idea that that can happen, but and I think that's why it appeals. Like that's why it would appeal to kids or teens. Yeah, they've still got that kind of touch. But I think it's for all the reasons that you said. Like there's some humor in it. There's it was original for its time. Yeah. I think Brad Dourif has done a great job of really embodying the character. For the little that you actually see of him as Charles Lee Ray, himself, the fact that he's managed to kind of create this very spooky, lifelike doll is really impressive. Yeah. To know they're the reasons I think it's I mean whether it can sustain, whether it has sustained 8 sequels, I don't know. I've not seen all of them, so I've definitely not seen the last couple.
Yeah. So here's the thing with that too, because I think it's interesting that it's had that kind of lifespan, that it's been able to go that distance. I think a lot of that has had to do with the fact that the creators have actually had a lot of fun with this franchise. And there's a lot of the humour comes out of it, the macabre, dark comedy that comes out of it. And I think that's why a lot of people connect with it, because they know that they can go along and just have fun watching it. As ridiculous and as far-fetched as that is, obviously with that statement, there are people that just does not appeal to. So it's one of those weird franchises where you either love it or you hate it, I think I fall more in the love camp, because as bad as some of them have been, like Seed of Chucky was a pretty woeful film. I think that was the fifth one down the track. I went to see Cult of Chucky, the latest one, as part of the Sydney Underground Film Festival 2 years back. And I took Ant along, and I took Richard along. Who's both of our podcasting kind of friends, and it was interesting watching them both. Ant was jumping out of the chair, and all the moments, but I could see those points happening and coming as they were coming. But I still loved that journey, and you could see Richard sitting there with a bit of glee look on his face, because I think he enjoyed the humour that was involved too. So it was interesting watching both of them kind of carrying essentially what has made these films, why the franchise still stands today. It will be interesting to see what this new one does and the take that it will go with, and whether that will be the nail in the coffin, so to speak. Because I'm yet to be convinced of that. I don't know. To me, I like the idea of it being a possessed doll, and particularly because it adds that human trope to it. Because as soon as you add a killer robot component, it just adds a completely different view to it. It's not. got the same thing. And fine, that may work. You know, that's why I am deliberately sitting on the fence with it, but I am kind of cautious that I don't know if it's the right choice, but
that's what that's what they say though. Like with artificial intelligence doesn't have humour. It doesn't get the nuance of personality and all that sort of thing. So I think that for me will be very hard to convey. Whether you can kind of bring that same vibe across.
That's right. But look, it's had this enduring thing. We've had, like I said, 30 years. We've just celebrated last year with it. It's, when you look at it, it does feel a bit dated now. And I always end on this on the podcast, and we do know there's a reboot on the horizon. But looking at the original, do you think it still stands today, and would you recommend it to people to watch?
I do think it still stands today. If you're not expecting all the bells and whistles, all the CGI and special effects, if you're a fan of pure horror, then of horror, then I think yes it does, and I would recommend it.
Yeah. See, I would recommend it too. I don't know whether I get caught with the rose-tinted glasses. I do think it's dated, but I do think it's been probably the best example. The one that always springs to my mind was the Trilogy of Terror film, which came out in 1975, which had 3 stories. It was 3 short stories, essentially made up one, and it was famous for having this one scene. One of the short stories was like a voodoo Zulu warrior doll thing that was attacking Karen Black in her apartment. But even then, that just it never had struck us as having that thing. More recently there was The Boy, which came out with I always get her name wrong, but the lady that plays Maggie in The Walking Dead, Lauren Cohen, I think her name is. But we've never had. I don't think we've ever had anyone that has appealed as greatly or hit pop culture as well. Hit the pop culture mainstream as much as Chucky has. He's an iconic figure in his own right, and and I think a lot of that has been because of the fun and the humour that's come into effect over the years with the sequels too. And I enjoy watching them. I will go and watch. I could easily pick one up now and go and watch one of them very easily.
Look, I think if they don't take themselves too seriously. And I think that's probably why it stands the test of time. There
you go. Cool. Well, thank you, Greer, for coming on board once again to have a chat about one of the classic horror films, and it's been good fun kind of revisiting Child's Play. I think it'd been a while since I'd watched it until recently for the podcast. It was, for me, I quite liked hopping on that nostalgic bandwagon and watching it again, as ridiculous as that car chase was, and as ridiculous as the opening death scene kill was. I still enjoyed the ride, which I think says a lot about the film. Cool. Until then, I'm your host, Saul Muerte. Do stick around for further podcasts of the Surgeons of Horror as we delve into the. We've been talking a lot about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre franchise and things like that. So I have no idea where we're going to be up to by the time this one comes out. So if we've gone beyond that, do stick around for all the other kind of horror films that we'll be talking about. Until then, as I said, I'm Saul Muerte. Thanks for listening, and thanks for joining us, Greer.
Thanks for having me.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Andy, no, please. We're friends to the end, remember?
This is the end, friend.
You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Music supplied by Peter Nezik. For more discussions or podcasts, head over to surgeonsofhorror.com or head over to our Facebook and Twitter sites for the latest news and updates.